Good morning, everybody. Since the time is short, I'll briefly summarize what my interests are. Some of you are forest officers and have experience in forest. 50 years ago, I worked in Himalayan forest at Dalhousie, and then I also developed insect repellents based on essential oils, one of which has been used in the defense as a mosquito repellent. So we do have interest in developing medicinal plants. But for the last 40 years, my interest has been in the prevention of heart disease and diabetes. So we are interested in developing indigenous drugs, especially of use for prevention of heart disease and diabetes. South Asians have the highest incidence of coronary artery disease, and India is the capital of diabetes, type 2 diabetes. We have about 30 million people now recognized. There will be another 30 million who do not know that they have diabetes. And by 2030, WHO projects that we will have 100 million diabetics. And what is very interesting about it is that when they are recognized, which is early enough in India, 30, 40 years, at the age of 30 or 40, for the rest of their life, they have to take these medications. And for example, I take 2 grams of metformin every day. And in addition to it, we also will have hypertension and other risk factors. So you will have multiple risks. I take about 7 medications. So it's a great burden on the liver to digest and metabolize these drugs every day for years and years and years. So it's assumed that some of the herbal products may not have such side effects. So we would like to develop herbal products as at least supplements at this point so that we can reduce the burden of these drugs. Suppose if I can reduce my metformin intake by 1 gram, it will be a great achievement. And if it can be done, yes, it can be done. For example, we have done studies with mulberry green tea. Karnataka Silk Board has produced green tea from mulberry leaves. And if we take a cup of tea before we take food, it does lower the blood sugar. But what is challenging is we will have to do clinical studies and demonstrate the efficacy of it, and also keep up with the production and quality control of these products. I'll just very briefly go through some ideas, but I will not read every slide or anything. So usually people collect various plant materials from forest and process it, and much of the bulk comes from such collections. However, in view of the fact that there is a big market, is projected to be trillions of dollars, now there is a lot of interest in developing specific nurseries and also even genetic engineering, for example. You can enhance the production of what you want in a given species. For example, we are interested in tulsi. There are 50, 60 species of tulsi. But once we have identified a component of interest, for example, lipid lowering, there is a component in tulsi leaves which lowers the lipid. So we can then genetically breed those species which gives us the maximum production. For example, if you want to take plant materials like even mulberry leaf, it's got a compound called D&J. It's only a small fraction of it. So if we can select the species of mulberry leaves which gives me 5%, we can increase the production. So that's one of the concepts, that how we start nurseries and genetically breed those where we can enhance the production of these things. For example, in some of the states in India, they have set aside huge parks for herbal parks. So even in India, there is a lot of effort, but if you look at the market, it is only 0.5% of the world market. So if you want to go for global market, then we'll have to come up with ideas of how we can cultivate it, how we can enhance the quality of what we grow, and also look at the production of CGMP, because we have more than 700 companies which are producing herbal products, but not one is approved by FDA or EMEA. The reason is again the quality control and the production and GMP facilities and the lack of clinical studies. We have to have some clinical studies to prove that they are effective. So one can develop modern nurseries. For example, in Chhattisgarh, they have set aside huge amounts of money to develop herbal parks. We can do it in all the states wherever the temperature and climate permits. And then also we can look at small scale production, because my idea is to develop from nursery to the clinic. So we have to have the entire thing produced at one place. I have not seen such a facility. I'm very much interested in developing one. So we have a concept called gardens of Omega Garden, where you prepare these type of cylindrical structures. It could be either in a glass perspex. In, for example, in Karnataka, we can use bamboo composites. We have a state funded bamboo composite factory on the way to Mysore somewhere, and then it becomes very expensive. These are rotary drums. They rotate, and the bottom of it will have this styrofoam with appropriate nutrients, and the seed is put in that. They rotate, and then in the center there is a light. So it's an artificial light for growing. So what it does is it will grow organically, so it's free of contaminants and very little of insects, because it is a contained environment, and they go faster, 10 to 20 times faster than a natural area. So selected species can be grown in this type of facilities in any warehouse, any place, wherever you want. It is equivalent to the greenhouses. And you can have a huge warehouse full of these drums, and you can enhance the production of selected varieties of plants. So there are a number of already approved plant products. I just mentioned a few so that we get an idea of already existing herbal medicine that's available already. And for example, Taxol, which was identified from the bark a number of years ago, it took almost 10 years to develop to the commercial productivity. At the time it was produced, when I published a paper, we were looking at how the mechanism works. It inhibits the microtubule and stabilizes so that cells cannot multiply. That's how it became anti-cancer drug. But now, after 10 years or 20 years, the industry is 1.6 billion for Taxol. This is a chemotherapeutic drug for breast cancer and various cancers. And why do we need these plants? Most drugs can be synthesized, but still we would like to have plant origin, because we assume that it's cost effective and it also has less of side effects. Digoxin is again another example, but once we have a basic molecule like morphine, we can change the structures and make them more potential or more specific and ideally suited. It's not just extraction of a mixing of a few drugs or a plant material, but one can go into the chemistry of these things and make them superior when we talk about plant-derived drugs. And as you heard from the speaker earlier, there are various ways of developing it, extracting, isolating, and also testing. We'll have to test it under appropriate conditions, so that if you are looking at anti-cancer drug, you have appropriate biomarkers, use them, and at the level of the laboratory, you can identify whether or not it is working as an anti-cancer drug or anti-diabetic or whatever it is. For example, in our case, which is our interest, we can just look it in 1 or 2 weeks whether or not it reduces blood sugar. It's as simple as that. And similarly, we can look whether or not it's an anti-cholesterol drug, anti-lipid-like, anti-triglyceride. Very simple assays we can develop these drugs in terms of applicability. So in the cancer cells also, you can show in vitro cells how it stops the multiplication and further develop them into appropriate modalities. So there are 2 areas of interest. One is our cardiovascular area, and then if you look at other non-communicable disease, cancer would be one of the very biggest areas, and then also immune responses, immunomodulators. So when we are talking about these series of steps, anti-glycemic, anti-cholesterol or anti-lipid, and then anti-cancer, we also have to look at the liver, because we are taking so many drugs, so we also have to have hepatoprotectants. So once we have identified 4 or 5 areas that we would like to look at, if we have a state-of-the-art R&D facility supported by, so then we can have the starting material, which is plant, isolate the components, develop appropriate capsule or whatever, and then in between we can also screen it for whether or not it does it. Once we have that, we have to have the clinical research facility where we can look at whether or not works in the real situation. Of course, there is intermediate, you can do animal models, but we can also look at some of these things because many plant products are approved for using in the human beings if they are considered safe enough. So here what I'm trying to show is one of the products that we are interested in is from beetroot, methylglycine, trimethylglycine. It's a methyl donor and it's a byproduct. Although Minnesota, for example, makes the sugar from beetroot, but they don't take this medicinal part and they just throw it away, methylglycine, trimethylglycine. So we can take this trimethylglycine. It is anti-glycemic and also it is reduces homocysteine. It is an antithrombotic drug. It's got multiple properties. So we can also take, for example, an extract from fenugreek, which also lowers glycemic index. So we can take 2-3 products and develop what we call as polypill, which lowers the blood sugar load. So if we can develop from known sources active molecules put together and develop a capsule, then we can use it as specifically anti-glycemic agent. We work with diabetic patients all over India, and it's a lot simpler for us to do clinical studies. And we can evaluate to see whether or not these compounds like trimethylglycine, fenugreek extract, Karela extract, etc., could be made into a polypill and used effectively to lower the glycemic burden. And although Karela extract and fenugreek has been known to cause, we do not have real clinical data that it shows in, because these are saying by I took it 25 grams every day and it lowered or whatever. We would like to have established clinical data. So the concept of, from our perspective, is to take, starting from fenugreek plant or sugar beet or mulberry leaves, and develop an appropriate way of delivering the drug and then testing to see whether or not it lowers the blood glucose. So similarly, we are interested in these diseases: obesity, hypertension, lipid abnormalities, blood glucose, then anti-inflammatory drugs, which is very, very important for us, and then of course anti-stress and immunomodulators and hepatoprotectants. So all put together, we need about 8 drugs to combat what we know as the most common ailments. And all of that can be done because we know the exact plants that have these components, and we need a facility where we can do short-term extraction, long-term extraction, bulk extraction, whichever is needed to develop these drugs into formulations. And I wouldn't go into this immunomodulators at this point because I have stressed very simply the interest we have in terms of the 5 or 6 areas. And if you look at why we have not been able to success, in spite of the fact we got 500 GMP facilities which makes pharma drugs for the US market, it is very simple because we have not met the standard of WHO or EMEA or FDA for that matter. So WHO standard is much simpler because, for example, we have 50% of the vaccine made in India is done with WHO protocol. So we can take simple protocols, which are simple enough, and start from there. And then we can go to the European regulation, and we can also, for example, start with a workshop. We had one workshop in Sri Chitra 2 years ago explaining what is GMP, what is CGMP, what is GLP. All these are very important to get regulatory approvals. And we can conduct such workshop and train the people so that approved facilities can be developed. We already have manufacturing facilities, but we had to have appropriate legal work and regulatory issues taken care of. The challenges to take it to global market is to get these approvals and also to establish R&D facilities which can produce this type of products for us. And regulatory approval in USA, of course, is simple, but because of this regulation and clinical trial need, a lot of it is sold as supplements because there is less regimen for that type of things. And even in Germany, it's the same thing that they have modified it simply to get these products quickly into the market. I've seen statements from our Secretary Jalaja several times that some of these should be lowered so that we can get into this market. But my appeal to it is we should not lower standards. We should bring our standards high enough so that we can compete globally, because pharma has done it. If we want to be global partners, we should be there. And it's not so difficult for us to bring up a few of these facilities to that level and demonstrate that it can be done and it is profitable. There's a huge market. We have not even touched that market. So I will not read all of these things, and I'll just conclude that South Asians have the highest incidence of type 2 diabetes, and it's going to go and increase for the next 50 years, because we have no way to stop, although there are movements to say we are going to stop, because our diet is like that. 75% of what we eat is carbohydrates, and that puts a huge burden on pancreas and insulin. And there is no way we can change it, because we don't know how to change it, because we don't eat meat. Majority of us don't eat meat or egg or anything. The supplementing that protein from vegetable source becomes very important. For example, in America, they said, very simply tell me, eat salad. Half of my food is salad, because there's no calorie there. I can't think of that here, because people don't usually eat salads, and fruits and vegetables and nuts are expensive. So we have to come up with how dietarily we can modify. It becomes part of our Ayurveda system too, holistic, sattvic, all of that thing. So there is a great need and a very great opportunity to develop traditional therapies for the management of these chronic disorders. Currently, there is a great window of opportunity for us to develop herbal products for the global market. India and China together actually produce 75% of the active ingredients for the world market in pharma industry. And having said that, I should say that we don't have an Ayurvedic product that's approved. It is high time that we do the same thing that the pharma companies did, increase and improve our quality of production so that we compete just like them and bring it to the global market. Thank you all for listening to my lecture.